As wrestling fans, we love to argue about office politics and who buried who. Everyone's got a favourite wrestler who was disrespected by the company, and everyone has some stooge they despise who's made a career out of ending the careers of others. But our stonking hard-ons for wrestling conspiracies are normally a total waste of both time and blood pressure, because some wrestlers are perfectly able to up their own careers without any help at all. Of course, to qualify as genuine career sabotage, the offence has to be proportional to that person's unrealised potential. Arn Anderson getting sacked after he'd already done it all isn't that bad, and Brad Maddox being binned off before a 3-year run as a Velocity mainstay is also not that bad. This video, on the other hand, is dedicated to all the superstars who were made to be big hitters, but who managed to strike out all on their own. My name is Adam Cleary, and these are 10 WWE superstars who sabotaged their own careers. Number 10, Enzo Amore. It's fair to say that if there's one thing this man had, it was personality, having been hired as he was on the strength of a video of himself working out and running his mouth. Paired with the not at all 7 foot, let's face it, big Cass, Enzo Amore proved charismatic enough to get his team's entrance over, if nothing else. The trouble is, he was trouble. Enzo refused to dial his brash gimmick down after shows, becoming so aggravating that his fellow NXT trainees wanted nothing to do with him. If anything, as an even smaller fish in a much larger pond, the main roster was less forgiving. He was kicked out of the Raw locker room almost immediately. Amore was first suspended, then fired when sexual assault allegations against him became public in January 2018, having neglected to mention them to anyone in WWE. Enzo denied everything, and 4 months later, the police closed the file, citing a lack of evidence. Now, under normal circumstances, that might see him brought back into the company, but sadly, the man was apparently such a god-awful heat magnet backstage that no one could think of a single good reason to rehire him. Number 9, Marty Jannetty. The tragedy of the old Rockers parable, IMHO, is that Marty Jannetty was probably the more talented of the two. The difference was that Shawn Michaels kept improving in the ring and on the stick, while Jannetty's issues with booze and pills started to hold him back. When the WWF broke them up, Jannetty was supposed to feud with Michaels in a rivalry that would be the making of them both as single stars. But after assaulting a police officer, he was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest and the angle was dropped. Jannetty was rehired to resume the feud, but was sacked again after the 1993 Royal Rumble, this time for allegedly being wasted in the ring. He'd return again that May, running after Michaels like a puppy, temporarily snaffling the Intercontinental title from him and going on to lift tag titles with the 1-2-3 Kid before again being released. This pattern of unreliability, and by that I mean of intoxication and uncontrollable behaviour, arrests and travel restrictions, would follow for some years, preventing him from ever wrestling in one place long enough to make a career work. Number 8, Ryback. It gets forgotten a bit now just how big Ryback's initial push was. He went undefeated for 38 matches, then got a feud with WWE champion CM Punk, and he won 3 Slammies. But even though he plummeted down the card the following year, he was still convinced that he was supposed to be the next big thing. The reality was, though, that without that monster protection from the office, he was good, but not great. His "feed me more" chant was always more over than he was. Refusing to adjust his expectations, he began negotiating hardball for his contract renewal in 2016. This included staging a dramatic walkout and ranting on his Tumblr account the following day about wrestlers' rights. After 3 months of cooling his heels at home, Ryback quietly announced that he'd left WWE. Number 7, Sin Cara. To this day, nobody's quite sure why CMLL megastar Mystico tanked so spectacularly hard under the Sin Cara name. While a different man wears the mask now, back in 2011, Sin Cara was a significant debut for the company, Triple H's first serious project as EVP of Talent Relations. However, things went downhill almost from day one, with Sin Cara immediately developing a reputation for botching that matched his previous reputation for lightning-fast aerobatics. Was it the new mask impairing his vision? Was it the failure to adapt to an American style? Was it his disinterest in learning enough English to interact with his colleagues? Was it the injuries? Was it his fragility in the ring? Was it a perception of a bad attitude backstage? Whatever it was, the last straw was when he ended a match in 2013 early after dislocating a finger. There are few things that disgust Vince McMahon more than perceived gutlessness. Number 6, Nails. Upon his debut in the WWF in 1992, it looked as though Kevin Nails Wackholes was being earmarked for something special. The fans were into his stare down with The Undertaker, the announcers sold it like the commission was feeding their families. No one could mess this opportunity up except for Nails himself, and I mean, who would be stupid enough Yeah, right, okay. Having been a top heel in the AWA, Nails was convinced he was worth more money than he was being paid. Cornering Vince McMahon in his office, he lost the plot, berating him at length and at volume before suddenly knocking him out of his chair and choking him on the floor. Things got so bad he had to be pulled off by Sergeant Slaughter, which is now of course a mental image you're going to have for the rest of your life. Insanely though, that's not far off what Nails told the police when they arrived. He claimed he'd acted in self-defense after McMahon tried to sexually molest him. Wrestling. Number 5, Scott Steiner. Shortly after rejoining the WWE in late 2002, Big Papa Pump was put in an air quotes money feud with Triple H. This was fine, except Steiner was suffering from nerve damage in his foot and barely able to wrestle. And as well as that, Trips had partially torn a quad muscle only weeks earlier. This meant that the build to their wrestling match consisted of nothing but arm wrestling, a pose down, and other please God nobody look at our penises style show of masculine dominance. Unbelievably, the actual match was a disaster, and he was gone by August 2004, having not been on TV for something like 6 months. Now, in truth, none of this is really Steiner's fault, but the man's rare talent for trash talking is as unstoppable in real life as it is in the ring. He's since spent years and years slagging off WWE, Triple H, and most importantly, Stephanie McMahon, about whom he's been as, God, how can I put this? Let's just say, as ungentlemanly as it's possible to get. That'll do. Number 4, Psycho Sid. Huge, intense, apparently sculpted by a vengeful god from evil granite, Sid was a wrestling promoter's wet dream when he was in his prime. And yet his constant jumping between WWF and WCW, his resentment over a failed drugs test, that infamous horrific fight with Arn Anderson overseas, well, by the time he'd won a world title, it was 1996. And what's more, the era of Shawn Michaels' stranglehold on the main event scene had already begun. He was booked as a transitional champion to give the Heartbreak Kid a hometown win at 1997's Royal Rumble, and he'd be asked to do a similar favour for The Undertaker at WrestleMania 13 only a few weeks later. Having missed his big chance in the early 90s to establish himself as a top star, he claimed 2 world title victories during WCW's worst ever creative crisis. The following year, Sid suffered the compound fracture that would end his full-time career. Number 3, Scott Hall. One of the sharpest pro wrestling minds alive today, Scott Hall had the look, the talent, and the size to be a household name. I mean, don't get me wrong, he is a household name, but on a personal level, his career was never all that it could have been. And that's some statement, mind, given he was one of the most prominent wrestlers of the Monday Night Wars, and his defection to WCW with Kevin Nash spurred the creation of the NWO. But despite this, Hall has never won a world title or been in serious contention for one due to his reputation at the time for diabolical behaviour when wasted and habit of no-showing bookings. Hall was eventually released by WCW due to these chronic, long-standing issues, and had it not been for his friends in the industry and his undeniable value as a talent when sober, he would have been released a lot sooner. Thankfully though, Scott Hall has recently managed to clean up his act, in no small part I might add, thanks to Diamond Dallas Page and a little crowdfunding to pay for a new hip. And when WWE finally inducted Razor Ramon into the Hall of Fame in 2014, it felt like a real celebration, if one tinged by a little bit of what if. Number 2, Ultimate Warrior. It is possible to say that no wrestler was ever handed so much on a silver platter only to then throw it all away. And I know it's possible because I've just said it. An instant crowd favourite, it didn't matter that the chiseled physique was due to years of steroid abuse, or that the intense promos were utter nonsense, or that the running and shaking of the ropes would have Warrior gassed within minutes. Fans adored this man. Warrior's own opinion of himself was even higher than theirs, though. In July 1991, he faxed Vince McMahon mid-contract, refusing to work until he received an immediate $500,000 check, followed by a raise and perks in line with Hulk Hogan's deal. Vince, the canny carny that he is, agreed to all of Warrior's demands until SummerSlam was over, and then walked it all back, eventually just outright suspending him. Warrior tried to quit instead in protest, but with another year left on his contract, the WWF simply ignored him and then just released him themselves when he failed a drugs test. His wrestling career then fizzled out with a short run in WCW, which, if nothing else, was memorable for a series of nonsensical supernatural storylines. Then finally he had a change of career to a bizarre hectoring form of life coach, and the less said about all that bigoted ranting, the better. There you are, there he is in the Hall of Fame, remember that. Number 1, Teddy Hart. Often cited as one of the most talented and charismatic wrestlers to come out of Canada's legendary Hart family, Teddy's legacy has been reduced to a cautionary tale thanks to his notorious unreliability and god-awful attitude. The youngest person to ever be signed to WWF back in 1998 at just 18 years old, Hart has been let go by almost every company he's ever worked for. Always for variations on the same issue. He is a liability, he is out for himself, and he is a rebel without a clue. Always late, always stoned, always turning up with dogs and an entourage of hangers-on, Hart's been called a human car crash by virtually everyone he's ever worked for. He was thrown out of Ring of Honor in November 2003 for throwing up in front of the crowd and executing unplanned high spots. Basically hitting moonsaults and a shooting star press from the top of a cage, causing the other boys to risk their lives trying to catch him. At 39 years old, he's still out there somewhere, alienating promoters and burning bridges the length and breadth of America. So there you have it, those are 10 wrestlers who sabotaged their own careers. Read to you, of course, by a man who's been trying to get sacked for about 18 months now, but somehow manages to avoid it. Let me know what you made of it all in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I've, of course, been Adam Cleary, unless you're Teddy Hart, in which case my name's Adam Wilborn, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.